Okay, I have sort of an outline I put together about the organization. But you're asking about my own background. I was mentioning to somebody before the group convened here that where I got started with 9/11, I tell folks, is in the early 1980s. I was involved with a church in Southern California that was sheltering refugees from El Salvador. And it was part of what's called the sanctuary movement. And so I had firsthand horror stories that I was hearing from people who were on the receiving end of U.S. foreign policy, is the way I talk about it. That, we were sponsoring death squads. We were, I'm going to just tell a story. One of the women that we were sheltering, she was in a prison in El Salvador. All of these women, none of them were charged with anything, but they were just swept up and they were in prison. They got released eventually by Amnesty International, and they immediately started showing up dead by death squad activity, sponsored by the CIA. That's what was going on there. She got shelter at a Catholic church and they smuggled her out of the country and she made her way here. So that was the kind of story that I was hearing there, and it helped to dislodge any illusion about American exceptionalism, that, we're the good guys, that kind of an attitude. So when 9/11 came along, I did not have this big hurdle that so many people seem to have, like, how could the US government ever do such an evil thing? They can't get beyond that, and it sort of blocks them from taking the evidence and following the evidence where it leads. And in order to do decent research, if you're going to be a forensic investigator or anything like that, you need to look at the evidence, follow it where it leads, and not be swayed by preconceptions about who might or might not do that sort of thing. That's a big red herring. So anyway, that's sort of how I think my whole life experience of dealing with the evil that the government does through its military and through its activism through the CIA, all this kind of thing, I've been sensitized to that. And 9/11 is part of this larger picture. And of course, a lot of people can tie it back to the JFK assassination and the whole string of assassinations and that kind of thing. But 9/11 was sort of a culmination of a lot of that kind of activity. Anyway, so that's sort of my personal thing. As far as 9/11 itself, I was basically looking at stuff like everybody else, finding things on the internet and so forth. And then I had an opportunity to give a talk at a physics conference, a physics teachers conference, that I knew the guys who organized it and all that, and I asked if I could give a talk about 9/11. And I had a few months to prepare, so I started doing some measurements of various phenomena associated with the World Trade Center buildings and all that. I had a tool available that I used in my classes teaching physics, where you can measure motion on video frames. You put a marker on each frame and you can calculate speeds and accelerations and energy and momentum and various things like that. So once I started measuring things, it's like, once you have a screwdriver, everything looks like a screw, right? So I had this tool and I started measuring everything that moves. So like those squibs that were coming out the side, those are coming out way over 100 miles an hour, a couple hundred miles an hour, some of them. Stuff that's being thrown out to the side, big, massive chunks of stuff being thrown horizontally out of the buildings, I've measured as being close to 60 miles an hour. The fastest one I measured was going about 76 miles an hour, I believe was the number I came up with. I mean, these are things like, how do you take a multi-ton object and throw it at 60 miles an hour horizontally out of a building? That kind of thing was what caused me to really realize something truly anomalous is going on here. All right, so that's sort of how I'd realized that some of the things that some of my skills could be used. to actually answer questions and look at this. And of course, I became best known among the truth movement when I measured building 7 coming down, and found I was surprised. When I actually measured it, I was expecting it to come down somewhere close to free fall. It came down on the money. It was at free fall for 2.5 seconds. And it blew my mind that it was so clear, like there's no question. It was a transition from support to zero support instantaneously. And I've done we have a paper I've done just recently. I'll come back to that in a little bit maybe, but that Ted Walter and I collaborated on a paper nailing down all of the fine points of my conflict with NIST over this issue. But let me bring up my notes here for introducing this new organization. The new organization that I'm on the board is called International Center for 9/11 Justice. It's a reboot, really, of an earlier pre-existing nonprofit organization called International Center for 9/11 Studies. And this was founded some years ago. James Gorley, who is an attorney, he's a patent attorney. He was originally doing some work with getting some FOIAs from trying to release videos and other material from NIST and some of these other agencies. And so he formed a nonprofit organization from which he could then get donations, but he also could then use that as a basis for seeking these FOIA requests. And he successfully did some of that. And then I was looking for some sort of a way to support, people who are involved in research and they could collaborate and that type of thing. So that was the organization. So we named it International Center for 9/11 Studies. It was basically 3 people. It was James Gorley, Graham McQueen, and me. And one of the first really big thing we did was we sponsored or helped sponsor the Toronto hearings. And so that was basically Graham McQueen's brainchild. And so they set up their own little committee and so forth. And so I participated with that as one of the speakers, but the group, the International Center for 9/11 Studies, James Gorley was like the MC of the whole thing. And he also pulled together all the papers into a book at the end, which was the Toronto Reports, which, by the way, is now available on the website. So I'm going to bring you back and show you that later. So you can actually see the Toronto Report, and we have a catalog of all the videos from that. It was a major event, Okay, so over time, we've gotten involved in a number of things. The center helped sponsor here in Denver, the Colorado 9/11 Truth Group put together this Denver conference on the Pentagon evidence, and the International Center helped sponsor that financially and so forth. Well, mostly it was just sort of occasional projects that would pop up. But this year, Ted Walter approached us and had an idea to try to reinvigorate this organization and give it a much more active role. And he had lots of big ideas. And so we actually said, well, sounds good. So Ted is the executive director, and then the 3 of us, Graham McQueen, James Gorley, and I were the original board members. And then we decided to expand the board. And so we've now added Kevin Ryan, who people know from the Journal of 9/11 Studies, and then Elizabeth Woodworth, who people perhaps know as being David Ray Griffin's assistant and involved with the consensus panel. And then Marilyn Langlois, who's an activist with Northern California 9/11 Truth Alliance. And then one of the really interesting people we brought in is Piers Robinson, who's in Europe. He's a very prominent scholar who's done a lot of work with propaganda studies, and he's also been very active working with the working group on Syria, with a lot of the corruption going on and investigating the Syrian war and things like that. And we have an advisory committee, which includes Bill Bernier, who's an architect, Matt Campbell, who is a family member of one of the victims of the North Tower, who we'll come back to in a minute. We did a video with him just recently. And then Bob McIlvaine, who I think a lot of you already know, who's a prominent activist. He's one of the 9/11 victim family members. And so that's basically who we are. And what I'd like to do is just bring up the website. So I'm going to share my screen. And well, you can see it. Can everybody see that? Okay, you're all nodding because you're muted. Very good, thank you. Okay, so here we are. 9/11 changed the course of history. By the way, this comes from one of the little things that, one of my sayings that I've been putting out there a lot. People tend to say, 9/11, that was what, 20 whatever years ago, 22 years ago? How can that still be relevant? And my response is, it was not an isolated event, it was a turning point. And 9/11 is with us still. And look at all the things in the current ongoing world whose genesis was 9/11. We still have the wars in the Middle East, in Syria, we had Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, and all those things. But it's gone on. Torture is accepted somehow. Imprisonment based on accusations without trials. How can that possibly be part of the American system? So all of these things are spin-offs from 9/11. And so if we don't address the root issue, we're going to let all these things fly. All right, so if you just go down here on the main page, here's one of the projects we did recently, which is Peace, War, and 9/11. Wave it or show your hand if you've heard of this, okay? And have you guys, somebody nod for me, have you had an opportunity to show this in your area? People need to see it. This is Graham McQueen. I think probably most of you know, died earlier this year from a cancer. And so he knew he was on the last stages. And so Ted Walter interviewed him, an extensive interview. It all happened in one day, but then they put it together as a major full-length motion picture. So Peace, War, and 9/11 is about the life and work of Graham McQueen, and it's an astounding picture, all right? We have a little bit of a little bit of overview here. There's Building 7, the Twin Towers, and so forth. If I just go through this a little bit, oh, by the way, anthrax, I just saw that go by. Remember, anthrax was part of the original event. It wasn't just 9/11 itself. It continued on. Who we are, here's the leadership. So here's our leadership team. There's Ted Walter, who's not on the board, but he's the executive director. And then here's James Scorley, myself, Marilyn Langlois. I don't know if everybody here knows all of these people. Piers Robinson, who's a very prominent European scholar who's been working on related issues, and is a very valuable person to have. Kevin Ryan, Elizabeth Woodworth, and then Graham McQueen, who died this year. And then here's Bill Bernier, who's an architect, Matt Campbell, who's this family member from, let me just pause and say here, we just did an interview with Matt Campbell, and I believe it's up on the site here. We can find it one way or another. But his brother died in the North Tower. They're British, they're from England. And they only found a little fragment of, I'm not sure what part of his body, a fragment of just some little piece of his body, but they repatriated that to England. In England, they have a law that anyone who has a violent death that is unaccounted for, the family has a right, they have a legal right to demand an inquest, which is like looking into the cause of death. And so the cause of death was just declared to be these planes hitting the building. And that didn't set well. Once Matt started looking into all of this, he knew that was not the cause of death. Well, they found another part of his body, and they repatriated that back to England, which he recognized could trigger a demand for a new inquest. And at this new inquest, the idea would be to, have discovery, open up the whole issue of what did cause the death. And using the research from expert witnesses and all of the stuff that's been going on as research over the last number of years, and make this something that is processed through the court system. So that was like, it's using this inquest as a tool to get out all of this and make it public. And so he and Ted Walter literally sat down and cooked this up. And I was one of a whole bunch of people, I guess, who were asked to be expert witnesses. And so we wrote up our statements and this type of thing. And they actually, they were turned down for their re-initiation of the inquest. But guess what? I mean, their grounds for turning it down were not legal in the British system. And so they literally, the Attorney General in England reversed themselves. I think it's a woman, actually. Fran, nod, yes or no? Yeah, it is. Right. Okay. Yeah. She reversed herself, and they haven't made a new statement yet, but they opened up the possibility that there's still a possibility that this inquest will happen. So this is like a possible avenue into investigating 9/11 on a legal basis like that. Anyway, there you go. Here's Bob McIlvaine. Okay. I'm trying to go back to the top. There we go. All right. Some of the basics here, some of the things just for beginners to take a look at, to open their minds on certain topics. Resources. Okay. One of the things that we wanted to do was to bring together the good work of 9/11 Truth Movement over the years, and to try and make sure that we don't just dissipate all of this. And so we brought the Journal of 9/11 Studies under our umbrella. So if you want to get to the Journal of 9/11 Studies, go to our website, and you can go here, and that'll take you to the articles, the letters, etc., how to submit. And so this is a conduit into the Journal of 9/11 Studies, and we're trying to reinvigorate the journal by stimulating more articles to be written. Ted Walter and I did a collaborative article just recently. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, nailing down all the loose ends and subtleties of the Building 7 collapse. NIST claims one thing, we claim something different. I have measurements based on the northwest corner of the building, and they were measuring the center of the building. And so Ted said, hey, let's measure everything. We measured all the corners that were visible and several other points along the way. We basically measured everything that's measurable on the roof line. Every point on the roof line transition from stationary to free fall simultaneously within 0.2 of a second, which was the resolution of my measurements. So within the resolution of the measurements, they were simultaneous across the board. I mean, that's like new measurements that actually reinforce what we've been saying. But anyway, and so we have a paper that spells this out and spells out the implications, and it spells out the degree to which NIST was fabricating is just laid out for you there. So if you want to understand the depths of their lying on this topic, that's the paper to read. And that's in the Journal of 9/11 Studies now. If you go there under articles, it's this one here, the instantaneous free fall of World Trade Center, Building 7, and NIST's attempt to hide it. And here's another one by John Cole, and we're hoping to see more articles appear soon. So that's going to be a resource that we want to develop. The Toronto hearings, we have, here's the Toronto report, which is that's the printed, I have it as a book, and you can get it as a book, but it's now also available chapter by chapter as PDF files right here. You can just link to it and read it yourself. Here's the hearings. And it's talking about it, and so forth. Okay, so all of these are so the Journal of 9/11 Studies, the Toronto hearings, we have the collected work of the consensus panel is all embedded here. So that's under our umbrella as well. We're trying to, and then papers, essays, and books, we're trying to be a place where we can pull together and archive the research that has been accomplished over the years so it doesn't just all get lost. Republished books, videos, and so forth. You can go down through these on your own. And here's, oh yes, talks and conversations. One of the people that Ted Walter was working with when he was at AE 9/11 Truth was a person who's I forget his name, sorry if you're listening, but he was a publicist. And he has all these people who are interviewers on these programs on his Rolodex, you know, and he has been getting us interviews. I don't know if you've seen them. There's a program called Redacted. I think that's Clayton Morris. There's been several interviews on Redacted. Kim Iverson did an interview with Kevin Ryan. So we've been getting these interviews with huge audiences, hundreds of thousands of listeners to these interviews. So that's been quite an amazing piece of new activism here. And let me see what else I had on my notes here to present. How about some questions from you guys? This is an organization which is it's a lot of familiar names. I think you've probably all heard of Kevin Ryan and Elizabeth Woodworth and all the rest of these people, or most of the rest of these people. And please come here and you can get to know them better and you can see the work that we're doing. So, by the way, regarding the informality of this talk, I was asked last night to do this presentation, so I threw it together. So Ted was going to do this talk, but he tested positive, as they say. And so I took over for him at the last minute. So I hope I have met what he would like for us to present about the group. It's a thriving concern, and I'm impressed. I mean, I'm involved with it, but Ted's the real driving energy source behind all of this. Go ahead. If you have questions, go for it. And I see some hands there. Let's see. Susan, I think I've unmuted you.
Thank you. The person with the Rolodex, was that, I'm going to butcher his name, DK Hawkins something, or I don't remember.
That name doesn't ring my bells.
Yeah.
So.
All right, never mind that. The documentary on Graham McQueen, peace, war, and 9/11.
Mhm.
I'm curious, just technically from video making point of view, the editing and the music and everything about it, the lighting. You must have had a lot of people involved in that documentary. And, is it a one-man project, or was there a heck of a lot of people who were specializing in these different areas that make a brilliant documentary?
Well, it was professionally done. It was Ted's project. Initially, Ted and Graham McQueen talked about it, and Ted did the interview, and he was actually underway with this by the time, in fact, he'd already done the interviews before he became part of this new organization. So you'd have to ask him on those kind of details. But yeah, he clearly had, he did some fundraising for it, and they got some professional editing and that type of thing. So.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a professional job, and I was blown away, absolutely blown away. In Boston 9/11 Truth, we've just begun talking about having a public screening of it. So hopefully by the end of this call, when we get to our agenda items, we can nail that. All right.
Okay, I see Alfred is next on my list here. Let's see if I put, oh, you put your hand down. Good, that's fine. Okay, yep. Alfred.
Yes. Sorry about that. I had 3 questions. One, your relationship with A&E, is the are they part of that drop-down list that you have in your resource? And if so, Ted had mentioned that all parties were welcome to this site. So I know a number of you have left A&E. Are you still a member of A&E?
Well, okay. I haven't worked directly with AE for a number of years. There's various, you know how internal politics goes, various things happen, right? And I did not leave on bad terms as far as I was aware, but there's all sorts of, there's a lot of turmoil that I just quit working with them probably, I don't know, 6, 8 years ago or something like that. That was where I was looking. That's where I talked to James originally and was saying we ought to have something to just support independent researchers. That's why we started the International Center for 9/11 Studies. That sort of grew out of looking for a new home, so to speak. So various people have had various experiences with all of that. We don't have any formal alliance with AE. We don't have any we don't have any hostility to them. They do their thing, we do our thing. And I'm quoting Fritz Perls, if by chance we meet, it's beautiful. If not, it can't be helped, That is Fritz Perls, isn't it? Yes, Fran is nodding. So yeah, so they are continuing to be a presence, and we are trying to do what we think needs to happen in the truth movement. And to the extent that we come together on various projects down the line, that would be great. And hopefully something like that happens, but there's no official connection. Does that answer your question?
The second question was the Alaska study. Is that also in your resource?
That's not, that was AE's project. So if you need to find about that, you'd have to go through AE.
Okay.
We don't have any connection with that directly.
You don't, okay.
Other than the fact that it's a great study and we would point people to it.
And the third question was, did you ever present to John Gross your findings? And for some reason, there was an old clip about a bunch of people that were asking him questions, and I don't recall if you were part of that.
I wasn't part of that. The clip you're talking about, I think they were asking about molten metal, molten steel. And that was, I believe, I heard somebody say it was a group down in Texas or something, but no, I mean, same guy, but I wasn't part of that crowd.
Okay, so you never really have talked to
I've
him?
never directly confronted John Gross.
Okay.
Hey, I would be glad to talk to John Gross
Well, that would be a
publicly,
fun
hopefully.
interview, yeah,
Huh?
for sure. And finally, are you still teaching or are you retired?
Both.
Both.
So I retired from teaching in about 2012. And my last few years of teaching, I was working with a charter school that worked with homeschoolers. And I became inspired to start creating courses for homeschoolers. So I have the entire high school math curriculum from algebra through calculus. So it's like for taking a standard set of textbooks and every single section through the textbooks. I have a video lecture and a second video where I go through all the solutions in detail. And so basically, you could have a high school kid literally self-teach from algebra through calculus on their own. And by the way, I've added a physics course since then. And if you go to my website, which is 911speakout.org, there's a link on there to where I've made available the first semester, the first half of my physics course, which has a lot of application to 9/11 issues. And so people who would like to brush up on the high school physics they wish they knew, that they don't or don't anymore or whatever, that gives you a way to get back into it. I've been considering doing like a course, put together a course of physics as applied to 9/11. That would be something that I think would be a fun thing to do. I just haven't managed to pull it together yet, time-wise. Anyway.
Thank you.
Rebecca. You have to unmute there.
I think I just unmuted, sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that I was reading Kevin Ryan's book, Another 19, on your, that's why I accessed it on your site just recently. I started reading it I'm in a couple chapters into it. I'll probably buy the book too, just to support it. But I just wanted to mention that I just realized that that's where I was able to get that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's another thing. So a lot of these things have been out for a number of years, and you go through a cycle. Here's most of your sales, and they diminish to nothing. Good time to put them out on the public domain. By the way, another video. In fact, well, I don't have it here. I proposed it, but it hasn't been acted on yet. But I have it on my site, 911speakout.org. I have Penny Little's video. She did an excellent film it's called Dust and Deception, I think, something like that. But it's about the whole issue of the toxicity of the World Trade Center dust and the impact it had on people, and the murderous nature of encouraging people to go back to work when they actually knew how toxic the air really was. So that is another one that I'm expecting to show up on the IC911 site, but right now you can find it on my site, 911speakout.org. And anyway, there you go. David, let me see, ask to unmute. Boom.
Yeah, first I want to praise you folks. The Graham documentary is, I think, my favorite 9/11 documentary.
Well, he's one of my favorite 9/11 people. So, I mean, he's an easy person to make a good video about.
Right. And I also, the rest of you probably know this, but at least in my opinion, the most important moment in the 9/11 truth history was David Chandler's question to Sundar, where Sundar admitted free fall. And that's so very important for all the times that people disagree with David about other things, that it's totally absurd to ignore that instance.
He didn't admit it openly, but he admitted it implicitly. And the final report admitted it in black and white and red. There's a red line that goes through one of the graphs, and you can, it gave the equation of the line, and you can literally read off the slope of the line, which gives you the acceleration. It's equal to the acceleration of gravity. So that right there, that graph admits free fall.
And I've told David this by in a chat before, but you other folks don't know this. I used to attend MIT Club of DC, and one time Sundar spoke there, and it could have been Boston, but it was an MIT club, and a fellow who was raised in another country who is not enamored of American exceptionalism said that it was very unusual, but there was shouting at Sundar. People were that much in disagree with Sundar from
MIT
at MIT club of either Boston or DC.
Was this a 9/11 group or a non-9/11 group?
No, this is the MIT club of that city, which means that these people are not truthers. These are just regular MIT alums who happened to show up. And there was, you never hear shouting at such an event, but there was shouting at Sundar is what this fellow told me.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I have 3 suggestions. One of them, David mentioned, I didn't realize he had done this so early, but I actually made a dozen proposals to TAP 5 years ago, and they basically proverbially spit in my face. And one of them is to go and do an educational effort at science teachers convention, which I actually had known David had done this.
I've done a couple of those. And
whether it be you or others, there are, now that COVID is over, supposedly, I believe there are 3 or 4, 1 national and 2 or 3 regional such events. And they're not expensive to rent a booth. Or you didn't rent a booth, you did it slightly different.
I gave a talk. Okay. 2 events. The first one was I just gave a talk, but it was to the whole crowd. It was a small group, but it was maybe 200, 300 people, something like that, filled an auditorium. And by the way, that was very early on. And when I mentioned Building 7, somebody said, huh? And so we took a poll. It turned out that at least half the crowd had never heard of Building 7, obviously never seen it. And that became the topic that was most talked about that day at lunch, and everything else was how come in this group of intelligent, presumably well-informed people, you could have that many people come together and not even know about Building 7. That was, anyway, so that was that one. But then I went to a American Association of Physics Teachers conference in Portland a few years later, and I gave a talk, and then I gave a poster session. So it's like you do a presentation with a poster and you stand by it, and they have like a cocktail party and everybody wanders by and, take a handout and have a conversation. And that was, by how many flyers I handed out, I know that it was visited by at least about 100 people. And people would come by and snicker, and I would just say, do you realize one of the buildings on 9/11 came down at absolute free fall? I have the measurements here. They'd go over and look at it, and they'd look at it and look at it, and then they'd wander away and they'd come back with their friends and continue looking at it and talk about it. It was like eye-opening. Just they weren't even conscious of this. So that was one of my more successful forays. But what it told me, when people say, what do the mass of physicists and technically competent people, what do they say opposed to what you're saying? And they're not saying anything opposed to what I'm saying. They don't even know about it. They haven't thought about it. So if you actually expose them to what happened, there would be a lot of consensus. So it's not the big controversy that people conjure up in their minds.
Well, considering that there are science teachers conventions and you're mentioning there are physics teachers conventions, I wouldn't be surprised if there are 10 or a dozen such events that David or other people could rent a booth at and go to and speak. And I am another reason why I like coming to Boston is that they care about outreach. Most of the movement cares about research and doesn't care about outreach. They do great videos, but they don't care about outreach. And Boston does. And I'm urging Boston and Colorado to look up all the different events that David or other people could go speak at, not just science, but social studies. When we tried to get a team within AE of teachers, there were 1,500 teachers who had signed the AE petition. The two people who were willing to be team leaders both could not really do anything, but we should do science and social study teacher events.
We had a email from I think it was a social studies teacher writing to the new group here, the International Center, wanting to have, suggesting we do 9/11 materials. He was supposed to present 9/11 according to all this stuff they were handed, which is all the official story. And he refused to do that, but he wanted to know if we could do some other. So there is an interest across that boundary that you mentioned, at least preliminarily there.
Right. One last thing, and I mentioned here because Susan is the only person who actually put any energy into this, and that is that a proposal I made 5 years ago was to attempt to find Nobel laureates who would do a personal announcement that they agree that 9/11 is not as presented. And the thing that's not obvious is that, oh yes, there are a lot of American Nobel laureates, and a significant number of them are really into American exceptionalism, but most Nobel laureates are not Americans, and therefore they're not into American exceptionalism. And Susan put a lot of work into it, and we had a fellow from Sweden who, a truther who I've never met, who did a lot of the base work. But that is something, particularly with the event of COVID being exposed as having started in the United States, we should try this again, because I'll bet you, despite the ridiculous Nobel laureate to the mRNA folks, it's going to be easier to get Nobel laureates to come forward. If we could even get 5 Nobel laureates to come forward over a period of several years, that would just be so huge.
Go for it.
I'm proposing.
You know how I got involved with Central American refugees? This is feeding back to a story I told earlier. I was at a church in Southern California. They brought in we started with a Vietnamese family, actually, and it was the boat people. Remember, I don't know if some of you are old enough. They had a bunch of refugees fleeing Vietnam, and they wanted churches and other groups to support them, to sponsor them, right? So we took in a family, and so week after week they'd show up, and they were just being warehoused there. And I went to the pastor and I said, "Don't you think we ought to be doing things to help these people get on their feet? Let's take the guy up to the junior college, and he had been a welder before. Maybe we can get a welding certificate or something so he can get a job." Anyway, I proposed that, and his response was, "Yes, I think you should do that." So that's my answer to you, David.
Well, I'm so poor, I have to mainly make money.
Okay.
But
there you
if
go.
you want to wait until I'm not poor anymore, I'll run with it. But I think it's worth considering, since
I'm sure you have friends, or if you don't, I recommend you make some. Just kidding. And
I have friends here in this group, and Susan ran with it, but was not able to continue.
Lawrence, let's see, asked to unmute. You have to do your own unmuting.
Hi.
Hi.
A couple of questions, David, regarding WTC7.
Yeah.
you're,
You're just breaking up. Go ahead.
pardon?
You're breaking up sound-wise. Say it again.
Was I too loud?
No, it was techno glitching on your voice. Just go ahead and speak more slowly, maybe. I don't know.
All right. Regarding Andre Rousseau's analysis of the seismic event of the day.
Yeah.
Okay, there was an event that occurred before the first plane struck. There was also an event that prior to the collapse of the North and South Tower, 2.1 for the South Tower and 2.3 magnitude for the North Tower. And then another really unique event that occurred during the collapse of WTC-7.
Mm-hmm.
How do you correlate the size of events with the building? What devices do you think were used, and when do you think they were used, and why do you think they were used that way?
Okay. I have not made a study of the seismic evidence, so I'm not the one to ask on all that. I do know in order to generate a seismic signal, you have to not only have a energetic event, but that energy has to get transmitted into the ground. And so if you have an explosion at ground level, that would create a compression in the ground. If you have things falling and hitting the ground, that can create some transmission to the ground. But say something like a plane hitting the buildings, that would never, that's too much leverage up there. What's happening here at the ground? Not much, right? So I knew there are certain kinds of events that can generate signals better than others. And as far as the timing, which has a lot of subtleties in terms of the material between the event and the recording station, in terms of how fast the signals propagate, it's a very complex thing. And I'm not an expert in that. And I know enough about it to know that I probably shouldn't talk about it, because it really gets very technical. So I'm not the one to ask about that.
I recommend that you, if you haven't yet, go to Richard's presentation of the seismology of the day, especially regarding the timing, because there was about 12 seconds before the collapse of the East Penthouse. It was separated from further events that occurred.
There was an event from camera 3. It shows the looking up at the WTC-7, and when the East Penthouse drops, just prior to when it drops, you can hear a boom, and it's a very sharp onset boom, and you can actually see it in a waveform if you do it. And if you take the travel time of the sound into account, that actually happened a number of seconds prior to the fall of the penthouse. So there was definitely some kind of an explosive device that generated that it was a very low frequency boom, but you can actually hear it. There are videos that will show that. I have some indication of some of this, I believe, in my video called Sound Evidence of Explosions. If you look at 911speakout.org and look for that video, I do talk somewhat about.
I'd like to share a screen for just a second. I just have one picture to share.
Maybe Susan can do that for you.
I think I've got it set up. We'll see. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Oops, and back. See that the building is starting to, you're seeing the crimp here, but there's.
And by the way, that crimp is not a vertical. It's not vertical. It's a lateral fold. It's sort of where the crimp is back, and where the corner of the building is, it's forward. So
right, that section where it's crimping is pulling back and in on itself.
Yeah,
and down.
Okay.
Things that we see, which is that just pretty much at the onset, within a half a second of the onset of the collapse, the facade of the building, the penthouse collapsed a second ago. But there are all these what appear to be pyroclastic clouds where the east side of the building. I just wanted to make a note of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is actually, for the crimping to occur to that extent, the entire building is in the process of falling at this moment.
That's
this is
correct,
not
yeah.
prior to the global onset. This is after global onset.
The smoke was rising well before this.
What?
Was rising well before the onset of collapse. That's just a note I wanted to make.
Well, you haven't shown evidence of that. You've just shown
this.
This picture is, you can see that all the stuff on the right-hand side, the fact that that's their global collapse has already begun. So I don't know about the kind of clouds you're talking about prior to that.
Well, this is just occurring. That's within a half a second probably of the onset, that the visible onset. I'm going to guess that's at that, maybe as much as.
This is probably this may be as much as 7 seconds after the East Penthouse came in.
Yeah.
This is close to the onset of global collapse.
There are pyroclastic clouds already reaching nearly the top of the building at the time that the visible collapse initiated.
Is that clouds rising up, or is that clouds coming out?
It's rising up.
I haven't seen video of that. So do you have this as a video?
There are a number of them out there.
Do you have this video?
I don't have the video. I've only got the number of videos that were taken the day that would show, would corroborate this.
Well, if you could send me some video evidence of that. But I mean, you're showing me one thing, and then you're making claims about something else. So I don't know how to put the two together. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying this picture, what this picture is showing is after global collapse has started.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm. Can you unshare your screen?
Yeah, I'm working on that. I keep getting these
view options. There we go. All right. Okay, Susan, unmute.
Okay. David Schlesinger, just want to let you know that work I did on the Nobel laureates, that was about 2/3 done. And I just was unclear on what the next step would be, and it would take a team to finish that project. So it's but it's still there. I still have it.
Right.
All right, so that could be something. If anybody wants to help me with that, I'd be happy to lend a hand. So, but that's not why I raised my hand. My ears perked up, David Chandler, when you mentioned homeschooling.
Yeah.
I just picked up this book.
I can't.
Three Tall Buildings. Right. And it's written for elementary level. And it's really pretty good. So I'm not sure what we can do with this, but it occurred to me that public
it's out there, and is that promoting the official story or something else?
No, it mentions about the architects and engineers that question the official story and everything. From across the world, over 2,000 scientists and experts began to investigate how the buildings fell. They had been to university and had fancy titles like architect, metallurgist, professor, or chemist. Some scientists looked at the dust under a microscope, said, zillions of little iron balls, they said. So it's pretty good. Our last guest speaker, Mary Maxwell, told us about this. So I picked up a book to see if I want to get more. They're available on Amazon for less than $5.
I see Fran writing something down right now.
Okay. And I figured, you know, we'd be beating our heads against the wall trying to get this into the public school system, but so I thought homeschool.
You should be invited to make contact with International Center for 9/11 Justice.
What's the title of that, Sue?
3 tall buildings.
The fact that it's 3, not 2, is a start.
It sure is. It's written by Dahlia May Lakian. I think she's Scottish. So I
Good.
recommend it for elementary age.
Well, we have a listing of books and videos and things like that on the site, on our website, and that seems like that might be something to consider. So
yeah. And you mentioned that you teach homeschoolers. Is there a consortium?
I create material for them to teach themselves. So I don't actually have interaction.
How do they get it? Is there a consortium for homeschool, parents who homeschool or
all
something?
kinds of stuff. My website is mathwithoutborders.com.
No, I mean, how do you reach out to the parents who homeschool?
They tell each other about it.
Oh,
it's
okay.
mostly
So
web, and plus I go to conferences. I go to occasional homeschool conferences, and people just seem to have found out about me. So mathwithoutborders.com if you want to see what I've got.
All right, excellent. But you target high schoolers.
Well, I target anybody who needs to fill in the gaps. So if you're an adult who wished they actually understood what trig was all about, here's your chance, you know? That type of thing. So
sounds good. Thank you. All right.
Anybody else?
Nobody?
Oh, yeah, I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Who are you?
Chris Berger.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you there, David, for your work done early in the movement. And I know one thing you support is you support the fact that a real Boeing 767 hit the Pentagon. Is that correct?
757.
757. Okay.
And most likely AA-77 itself. By the way, that's not what. Wait a second. That's not what the organization supports. The organization does not have a position about that. That's my position. And I'm going to be participating in the Debated Topics Forum. And I've submitted my first paper, probably will be a series of papers, where I point out the evidence based on the damage to the wall of the Pentagon, showing that it was an impact event, that it was an impact by a large plane of the appropriate size to be a 757.
Okay, so just so you know, I'm also a 9/11 researcher. I have a degree in aerospace engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer, so I got into the research pretty heavy. Can you share my screen right now?
You can share it.
Well, how do I do that? Just
share screen.
Oh, share screen. Okay, so I click that button,
and you find the picture you want to share.
Oh, okay. Right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm measuring.
I can talk about that.
Yeah, I'm measuring a window looking out from the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Okay. And one way I can measure it is I measure a red one of those red blocks, building blocks, and I know they're about 8 inches. So I take my scale and I measure it, and it's 3 feet 6 inches wide by 5 feet 0 inches tall. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then
there's perspective in there, by the way, you know.
Right. So I mean, that's roughly, it could be off, 5 or 10% or so, but that's how I measured that. Now I'm going to do another screen share, and I'm sharing. You're probably familiar with Wayne Costy's presentation. You support his presentation.
We collaborated on that.
You collaborate. So So you guys see what one? I got a screenshot from his presentation, and he says that the airplane is 141 feet wide. Okay. You see that measurement at the bottom says 141 feet. So if I actually scale that 141 feet, and I just put this into my CAD program to scale that. If this is 141 feet, then that window is 9 feet tall by 5 feet 3 inches wide. So how can the window go from 5 feet tall to 9 feet tall?
Okay, okay. There are a lot of things about these measurements. The distance between the columns here are 10 feet. And so if you want a measurement here, like from there to there would be 10 feet. From there to there would be 10 feet. And so that's one way to get a measurement along there. I didn't do this picture. I don't know if there's a I don't know if there's a flaw in the measurement there or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I find a major flaw. I mean, he's off when he's measuring that 141 feet, you know, going from 5 feet to 9 feet.
Well, I think he's also taking into account the fact that the plane is coming in at an angle, and he may have the foreshortening already taken into account there. So I don't know, and without the context of this exact measurement, how to interpret what he has there. So I wouldn't just directly scale it up as though it's a linear measurement.
Well, scaling stuff up is, I mean, it's not, you know, I could be off 10%, but I'm not going to be off 80%. That's my point. So I just want to point that out. And then I don't know if you want to take a look into that for me. I'd appreciate it.
Well, okay. So can I respond a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. The whole idea of the size of the opening equals the size of the plane is not valid. The wingtips of the plane extended beyond the opening. The opening was basically 100 feet on the wall. And then that goes up to column 18. And then 19 and 20, you can see on the exterior of the building, you can see an impact. You can see impact damage from the wingtips. And it's at a slope consistent with the position of the wing on the surface. On the left side, you can see damage up to column 8. Column 9 is bowed but not broken, which means it was impacted. It was bowed inward, which means it was impacted from the outside, but it was not broken, which shows that the wingtip that hit that somehow that wingtip got dragged in around that column. So it was like a fulcrum for the wingtip to come in. So I have all of this spelled out. If you pause a little bit and look at the first of the series that I've put up, I've submitted to the International Center for their Debated Topics Forum. I talk about this stuff and try to explain the implications that I see in it. And if you have a critique of what's there, if you think there are errors, this is open to anyone to respond. It's supposed to be an open, intelligent, rational, respectful debating forum.
Well, yeah, I'd like to send you guys an email pointing those errors out. I just wanted to bring you one more screenshot here. This was a photo of one of the light poles that got knocked over, and it's actually breaking at the strongest point at the really bottom where the gussets are.
No, that's not true. It's broken here, but this is a fuse. It's called a mechanical fuse, because when you have like a truck or a car that hits a light pole, you would rather have it break the light pole free than for it to stand fast and crush the passengers in the car. And so the pole is designed to have a breakaway position, and that's where it is. So that was where it's designed to break off upon an impact.
Yeah, I'm just sharing this other photo too. I see the light poles. Here's some of the light poles sitting on the Pentagon's lawn.
Yeah,
they're actually bent in the shape of a, like it looks like they were put into a pipe roller. I have experience with that kind of stuff. I've designed things that I have to send it off to a special rolling a vendor that has this machine that'll roll pipe, and I just don't see how it could bend in a nice rolled shape like that. And then so you really think that the airplane wing could hit how many poles? 6 poles,
5.
and with 5 poles without coming off? It's like
there was part of the right wing that did fall off on the lawn, and if you look at Wayne Costy's literature, it shows a picture of it, and it's one of the you know, where on the wing where the wing comes in and out, that little thing broke off. It's not little, it's a pretty big chunk of stuff.
How large of a section of a wing was that? Because
you can see it. It's discussed in Wayne Costy's in the series that Wayne and I put together, and I can't tell you without going back and looking for it. But if you go to 911speakout.org, go to the Pentagon tab, you'll see where the Wayne Costy presentation is there. Go to the one that talks about the debris, and that's a piece of debris on the lawn that can best be interpreted as a part of the wing that was broken, because that part of the wing hit both the first and third light poles. And then that dropped off before it ever got to the Pentagon. So it was not knocked off in the impact, it was knocked off due to the light pole.
How wide was that piece of wing?
You have to look at it, and
over
I don't have those numbers for you.
10 feet, 20 feet? Huh.
I don't have those numbers for you.
I don't remember ever seeing that debris. I mean,
well, you can see it there. There's a picture of it. It's very clear.
Yeah.
So you need to, that's the thing, is one of the problems that Wayne and I have with all of this material is there's so much of it, and people tend to be unwilling to sit down and go through it. If you actually go through what we've presented, there's a tremendous amount of material, and you would find it, some of it you might interact with and say you have problems with it, and other things you might learn something. But that piece I didn't even know about until Wayne showed it to me. But it's one of those flat, I forget the name for it, but it's discussed there in those videos.
Yeah, wouldn't they also have a lot of incentive to show the airplane hitting the Pentagon as the PSYOP? I mean, if they have great footage of this airplane hitting the Pentagon, wouldn't they want to show us some video of that?
They did show us some video of that. They have 2 frames, that one from each of 2 video cameras, and that's discussed there as well.
Huh.
Yes,
but you agree that the video wasn't clear.
Wait. Too many people all at once. Okay. Chris?
Yeah, but you also agreed that video wasn't very clear. It was like the most unclear video they could ever show us.
They showed us what was asked for in the FOIA, and what by taking what was asked for in the FOIA and looking at what there was actually shown there, you can see the plane, and you can see it in 2 different from 2 different cameras, and the offset, they were recorded on the same device, and the spacing between the timing between da-dum, 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 as the frames were recorded is 4/30ths of a second. And you can actually talk about how far the plane moved in that amount of time, and that gives you the speed of the plane that's consistent with other measurements of.
And how fast was the speed of the plane, David?
Over 500 miles an hour. I don't know the number. 500.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell you based on John Lear and based on the aerodynamics courses that I take and my really advanced research, is that you're not going to get a Boeing above 380 miles an hour at sea level, no matter what. It's going in free fall or whatever type of speed. There's just too much drag. So I don't buy that it was going 500 miles an hour.
I'm just showing you what the measurements. The measurements show that. Measurements show that. The FDR shows that, and the radar measurements are consistent with that as well. So the fact is, it was in a dive, and that helps relieve some of that issue of it. And I think there was a lot of global statements that get made about it that aren't necessarily supportable. So I don't.
Well, I mean, I think the wings would break off if it's going.
Let's talk one at a time, please. By the way, this is one of the reasons why we're doing the Debated Topics Forum, is that I'm putting up a 2,000-word statement that shows the evidence that I need to present, and I explain it and present it. if you want to contribute to the debate, you need to come up with a reasoned statement that explains your point of view on what's wrong with what the first one was. So that's the way the debate needs to go. It's not the kind of thing that can be resolved in like a Facebook post or in just sort of a back and forth like this in this conversation. There's obviously, it's a long-standing debate in the 9/11 truth movement, and we're making an attempt to put, we're making an attempt to put this onto a rational conversational basis that
I can't control the volume.
Excuse me?
Come again?
Does the Union Square team go to Tufts University?
Apparently so.
I don't know the context
I guess
of all this talk.
I had to mute him. Sorry.
Okay. Are we done, Chris, or did you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And by the way, I really enjoy 9/11 research, and I'll share some, I'm always learning new things, and I'll share something with this whole group here that you guys probably don't know, but you guys know which date they first started constructing the Pentagon? The first day that they actually started building the foundation of the Pentagon. Do you know what?
Let me guess. 9/11 on some year.
Yeah, it was September 11th, 1941. Exactly 60 years before 9/11.
I think I heard that somewhere.
But that's when they actually. And like, another one I have is I have David Rockefeller's watch on the Newsweek 1967 Newsweek article before he built the towers, and his watch is pointing to 9/11. So I know there's a globalist cabal that likes their special dates, and 9/11 was certainly their special date.
Okay,
David?
Thank you.
Yeah,
David?
Yeah, thank you, David, for addressing my question.
Can we unshare your screen so we?
Oh, sure. How do we do that? Okay, stop. Yep,
there we go.
I got it. Okay.
David?
Who am I speaking to?
John Bottomley.
I don't hear.
I worked with steel pipe a lot, and
Just a
it
second
will
here.
trim.
A second here. Is your video on? I don't see a camera for
No,
you.
I've got no video. I'm just on a cell phone remotely. But anyway, I work with metal pipes and a lot, and they will crimp when you try to bend them. They have to be in a special machine, and they have to terrific amount of force has to be put on them to bend them in a circle like that. So that is very odd. And also, if they have a fuse, how could there be that much force put on the pipe? And also, I think
inertia.
that we
you hit a
inertia?
You hit a long pole with a fast-moving object, and there's inertia of the pipe. I think
that would turn it into a V. That would turn it into a V.
Okay,
But I think we waste a lot of time.
Yeah, this is not a productive forum for this. I think what you would need to do is to take your thesis, write it up, so that you show what you can find out from the observations and what it implies, and put it on the debated topics forum, and then other people can then respond. But I can't just, hey, I'm not a pro in all of this stuff. I'm a high school physics teacher, and I've looked into certain things, and there are certain things I have pretty high confidence in, and other things I have sort of general knowledge of, and other things I'm very skeptical of. And then, so you put all that together, and I can't really just do a generalized, clear up all the remaining questions in a forum like this. It just turns into sort of a little sideshow.
Aren't we wasting a lot of time? It doesn't matter if it was a missile or a plane.
Excuse me?
Aren't we wasting a lot of time? It doesn't matter if it was a missile or a plane. The government lied. They hid all the videos. There was cordite in the building, etc.
Well, there are a lot of implications on whether it was a missile or a plane that do matter. For instance, there is the whole effort to identify the DNA of the passengers in the plane, and that has been done. And they found every passenger except for one, which was a small child apparently. But so in other words, if you say it was not a plane that hit the Pentagon, you're saying that all of that whole block of research was invalidated. you're going to trigger a lot of family members who, you know, so it raises the question, what was done with their family, you know? I mean, there are questions where it really matters to some people to know what really happened. And so to say that it doesn't matter if it was a missile or a plane, I think is slipping over a lot of that stuff that does matter.
Well, I think the government lies.
I agree the government lies, but it doesn't mean that everything the government says is a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to basically look at each statement and on its own merits. You have to evaluate it based on the evidence, and you have to decide for yourself whether that particular statement was a lie or not. And there's a lot of things that get said and passed along that I think are sort of, you know, hand-waving arguments, and that I don't really like to buy into that. So anyway, thank you. So I see a hand up from Rebecca.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was just wondering if there is a place that we could go to actually read about the information of the identification of the victims who are on that plane at the
Yes.
Pentagon. That would be interesting to take.
There, in the Moussaoui trial, there was a database that there was a large scale thing. And in fact, Elizabeth Woodworth has researched this a bit in terms of the actual people, like the medical examiners that were involved in identifying the body parts and so forth from the victims. And the Moussaoui trial they included a graphical front end to the database where it's called Pentagon Scene, I believe is the name, and it's a Windows program. And if you run the program, it actually gives you access. It has a little oval where each body part is found on a map of the Pentagon floor, on each floor, first floor, second floor, and so forth. And then it's identified. And so if you go there, you can actually see the ovals that coincide with individual people. And for instance, you might find here is an oval for somebody, and then here's another oval with the same person and another one of the same person. And you can see a stream, and these streams of body parts for that one individual tend to radiate toward the direction of motion of the plane. So it shows that the body parts were actually scattered in the direction of motion of the plane. So there's quite a bit of information that's actually publicly available. And
that's associated with the Moussaoui
I have that
trial?
downloaded. You can find it in the Moussaoui trial evidence. I'm not sure how to exactly, that's where I got it originally. And so I know it's available.
What was the name of the actual report? Is there a specific name, or do I just kind of have to search for the Moussaoui trial? And
go to the Moussaoui trial evidence, and they have the evidence from both sides of the trial, and you can go through there, and it has a huge amount of material. But the name of the actual file, it's a executable Windows file called Pentagon Scene.exe.
Okay.
And I have a copy. If you can't find one, if you write to me, I can somehow get that to you.
Okay, thanks.
And I have pictures, I have screen grabs of that in some of the things I've written about and so forth. I have a video I made a couple years ago called Flight 77 at the Pentagon, and it basically goes through my argument for the fact that the plane was not only a 757, but it was actually the plane that came out of Dulles Airport and so forth. And that has a section in it where it talks about it and shows some screen grabs from that video, from that program.
Okay. Yeah, I would be interested in that. I mean, I didn't want to belabel it.
So go to 911speakout.org, look under the Pentagon tab, and you'll find it there's Flight 77 at the Pentagon.
Okay. Thank you.
Alfred?
Yes, I just had one question that's always gnawed at me. And where are all of the other videos that were on the Pentagon, and why why is the government unwilling to share those?
Okay, can I point out that that question implies that you somehow know that there are other videos that the government is withholding. The fact is we don't have other videos. You have an assumption that there might be, but then again, there might not be. Ken Jenkins has done, I think, a credible job of arguing that the videos that were available that showed anything about the plane have in fact been released. If there's more, great, we can look at them. But I think we need to focus on, looking at the evidence we actually have, some of which is what the government has given us.
Jean Laratunda and Mick Harrison have filed a FOIA request for all the videos within I don't know how many miles of the Pentagon, and they're still waiting on that. And
well, that would be good if it gets released.
Yeah, I know. I have no knowledge of any of this, but I'm just questioning in my own mind. You know, there had to have been more than one somewhere.
Well, but I also point out that the side of the Pentagon where these cameras would presumably be located was what had been just refurbished. At least half of that side has been refurbished, and any cameras may not have been reinstalled. Who knows? I don't know the facts about specific cameras that anybody can say, there's a camera, where's the data? I don't know. But the two cameras that were released that did show, each one shows a frame with the plane, and then it shows before and after. And these were taken at 1 second intervals, but the two are offset by a short a fraction of a frame. Like, I mean, it's 4/30ths of a second difference between the two sequences of frames. Those we do have, and I've done some work on it, and the work is there where I said, go to 911speakout.org, go to the Pentagon tab, and you'll find that stuff there. And I think really people need to, if you haven't seen it, it's very eye-opening material that you really need to look at and not just speculate about other things until you've actually seen some of what, I mean, I've shown what I think is pretty clear evidence of the planes crossing the lawn, and it's right there.
Okay, I will do that. My homework assignment.
Yep, homework assignment.
David,
I'm the teacher here.
you are. I want to thank you for taking all this time. I don't know if you have to get anywhere or whether you want to keep going.
Oh, I have to eat dinner sooner or later.
Yeah. If anybody else, do we have any more questions from the people on the call, on the Zoom call? I don't all speak at once.
Well, just one last question. I mean, I've seen lots and lots of plane
Who's
wrecks.
speaking? I can't tell.
Chris
Okay.
Berger. I mean, I've seen lots and lots of plane crashes, but like in the first hour of footage, I mean, there's just absolutely no real, wreckage of a plane hitting a building. It seems like the building just swallowed up the plane and the plane disappeared. It just seems really, really strange. I mean, you don't think that seems strange?
I think you really should look at Wayne, the video material that Wayne Costy and I put together. Mm-hmm. It's 911speakout.org. Go into the Pentagon tab and look for Wayne Costy's sequence of videos. You see lots and lots of plane debris. And I think people just take snippets of what they've heard and run with it, but it's there and you can look at it. And once you've looked at it, then maybe you want to talk more about it. Okay. I just think people who say there's no plane debris are not looking.
Yeah. The only point is that, yeah, I mean, I guess the main controversy is that your position supports the official story.
No, it does not, by the way.
Oh, it doesn't support
reject the idea that our position supports the official story. The official story is we were attacked by Al-Qaeda, that it was a surprise attack, that it was, I mean, there's all these elements to this official story. I do not buy any of that. I believe that, Yes, they used a plane at the Pentagon, just like they used a plane. They used 2 planes at the World Trade Center. Then they used a plane at the Pentagon, and there was another plane, who knows where it was headed. They tell us it was headed someplace, but nobody told me how they found out inside the brains of those dead hijackers or whoever, where they intended to land that thing or push it, you know? So
you think the hijackers flew the plane, or was it a remote control?
like, we can't get into every single question here.
Oh, okay.
So please.
The other question is why, you know, when they had all this knowledge that this plane was supposedly heading at the Pentagon, did they do nothing about it?
Sure, that's a major question. That
if
really
there was a plane,
I mean,
saying there was a plane, and I don't know, I'm kind of like on the fence about it, but I need to do more research about it, I guess.
Yes, I really, really strongly recommend that you see the research that has already been done, that we've put together hundreds and hundreds of hours of work on this topic. And when people talk to us and quote to us things that are simply not true, and we can show it to you, we have shown it to you, but people haven't looked at that. You really, please need to do your homework. Go to 911speakout.org and look at the Pentagon tab. There's a ton of material there that will address the kinds of questions you guys are raising. Okay? And in terms of the new organization, to bring it all back, we have the Debated Topics Forum for the purpose of solid, rational conversations about these topics without all of the kinds of personal attacks and things that so many of these conversations have descended into. Okay.
All right. Anybody else?
Well, Lawrence has his hand up.
Lawrence, go ahead.
Okay. Regarding the evidence, there are 3 reports by people that were there first thing in the morning, very shortly after the attack, who made a lot of statements that denied the existence of anything they could construe as the wreckage of an aircraft, a Boeing, a 757 or a 67 airframe, whichever. I couldn't see any evidence in any of those pictures, and having been an aircraft mechanic for 3.5 years at Loring Air Force Base and having been to a crash site, I recognize a crash site. I agree with the 3 people whose reports I share on the screen here, that I have seen no evidence of an aircraft having crashed any parts. I've seen the presentation that you and Wayne have done. Matter of fact, I went over 3 or 4 times the whole thing, and I actually met with Wayne at gathering a number of years ago where we co-presented. Wayne was very generous with his slideshow, and it was just a fascinating interaction. At that meeting, the consensus was pretty much that there was no evidence that people at the meeting could recognize as having been evidence of an aircraft having crashed. Leave it at that, David.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Well, I need to leave because I have dinner waiting for me somewhere.
Okay.
And so I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. So I hope you will separate in your minds. I was here initially, presumably to represent the new organization. The organization has no position on the Pentagon issue, but we are engaging with it through the Debated Topics Forum. And we're hoping that that will be a contribution to allowing this thing to move forward in a rational way that people can actually learn new things and change their minds and come to conclusions based on solid evidence. So that's the hope. Okay.
That's
Thank
fair
you
enough.
so much, David. for joining us. And, you know, I look forward to further discussions and, you know, sharing the video of this meeting. Very,
Okay.
very much appreciated, especially since you were caught off guard and joined us at the last minute. It's very, very, we're honored that you could do that for us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.